A very good morning and thank you so much for having taken the time to join the webinar. My name is Jay Reddy. I'm a senior technical evangelist at ManageEngine. So through the last 1 year, things have been truly crazy. We've been trying to do our best as administrators to keep attackers at bay in spite of all the drama that's happened. In fact, if I were to go on and say, I'd say it's administrators who've kept a lot of businesses on, if not for cybersecurity professionals. You keep hearing about healthcare institutions being under attack amidst the whole pandemic situation. If not for them, it could have been a very, very big challenge. And the whole idea of going remote has also been a big deal of workload on these folks. And it's just about a matter of time that we've cracked through the whole remote working scenario, and we are trying to do our best to keep attackers at bay. So today's webinar is at a very important point in time for cybersecurity, and the webinar is on something that needs to be addressed right away, which is business email compromise attacks. Of all times, it's now when we just can't afford that one attack. So the webinar is structured around understanding FBI's recommendations on business email compromise attacks. Thanks for taking the time out today. The webinar is being recorded. If you have questions coming up, please feel free to use the chat window that's on the right side of the webinar view console itself. You can just drop me a message. I'll try and take your questions. I'll try and take as many questions as possible. If I miss a question or two, don't worry. Rest assured, towards the end of the webinar, I'm going to try and answer all your questions. We'll have a 10-minute Q&A towards the end of the webinar. Wonderful. So with the whole deal of remote working, organizations like the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI had to step in to give out recommendations for enterprises, small and medium scale businesses all alike. There's a lot that's changed. The whole cybersecurity landscape, the dynamics has changed, how identities are being handled has changed, and the whole idea as to how we've been doing it all along has to be revisited, because there's this one parameter in the equation that's taken more precedence than ever before. That's your users. Your users are working remotely. They're all around the world. In fact, as I speak, I'm working remotely today, and I've been doing so for the last 1 year. And through experience, we've been able to help a lot of organization, and we've kind of learned a thing or two. And today's webinar is essentially going to address those issues head on. That's the idea. With employees working remotely, one understanding that could change how we handle security is the fact that your perimeter, that has been your organization back in the day, with all your sophisticated SIM solutions, with all your sophisticated firewall rules, it was impossible for users to fall victim. There were rules, regulations that kept the attackers at bay. But now, while your users are working remotely, it's become absolutely impossible to be 100% sure that your network is secure. And why is that? Because your users, as they work remotely, form the very defense system of your network. Why am I saying this? Your users and identities of your organizations have essentially become the perimeter right here, and that's what we are trying to protect, safeguard through today's session. So as we go forward, one common observation you, I, and everybody else in the cyberspace must have made is attackers being absolutely malicious in their intent, trying to leverage the situation at hand and trying to initiate attacks. The most common attack last year and through the beginning of this year have been BEC attacks. The FBI stepped in to give away recommendations. A major chunk of it is basically because we did not have enough time. There's nobody to blame, but administrators weren't given enough notice. Most of these organizations turned around overnight. I'm pretty sure the ones who are joining will understand the pace at which we had to change everything right from ground zero as to how identities interact with the organization, just so that we can enable our users, keep the lights on for our businesses and go on. And that comes or has come with a cost, and that's what we need to understand. Because while your users were working remotely, what attackers were looking at was to exploit that opportunity. We've had instances where there were targeted attacks on critical stakeholders in the organization while they accessed your company resources from their home Wi-Fi network. And we know how difficult it is to secure, or how unsafe these networks are. So there are too many variables in this equation. And through the session, I'm going to try and help you understand one philosophical change to your cybersecurity approach, which is zero trust. For all along, we've assumed and we've worked with this agenda where any user within the organization, right within the perimeter, gets trusted by default. So we're going to undo that philosophy and say we're not going to trust anybody, be it an insider, be it users who we work with, contract employees, nobody. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and foolproof our entire system, be it BEC attacks, be it account takeovers. We would want to foolproof from the very word go. That's the idea with which we're going to move forward. So as we speak, there's been one observation: threats and attacks have increased at a rapid pace. Organizations around the world have ended up paying a lot of money in the process. We see Microsoft 365 at the center of the whole migration. If you see apps like Zoom and Microsoft 365 have had crazy adoptions. A lot of us, in fact, today must be connecting through Zoom. A few of us have already moved to Microsoft 365 and trying to work our way around, but this change was forced upon us, and there are many checkboxes that were left unchecked while we intended to do the migration ASAP. This has become a classic question of enabling your users versus at what cost of security. And like the graph right here points out, the numbers are a little striking, they're jarring, they dishearten me all the time. But as you see, it's about time we stand, stop, understand, and go about fixing this. Phishing email attacks have been on the rise. The numbers are quite self explanatory, and we intend to do nothing but understand this fact that users are prone to make mistakes. They've been doing that even while they were at work. You know how many of your users in your organizations tend to write their passwords on a piece of sticky note and stick it right on top of their desktops. So that's the state of users we're dealing with, and now while they're working remotely, they tend to do mistakes all the more. Not just that, these users are also going to be bringing these vulnerabilities from their personal devices. And if you try to crunch what's happened in the last year, you've seen a major increase in number of organizations paying ransoms, especially healthcare institutions and financial institutions have been the target right here. Data, as you know, is the gold for these attackers, and they're trying to compromise and leverage on PII mostly. And the easiest way to get into your organization, pretend to be insider, is business email compromise attacks. And the worst part is there are small and medium scale businesses that have taken the most hit. As we speak, there are many businesses who are still trying to recoup, even set shop as we speak. But it's a matter of time before most of us tend to realize that there's this one problem, which is the cost of implementing these cybersecurity practices. It doesn't come at a budget friendly option. Most of the time, we end up paying a premium for security solutions. And when it comes to small and medium scale businesses, it is a matter of making that decision as to prioritizing either keeping the lights on or ensuring cybersecurity. So we're going to try and make it as simple as possible, as straightforward as possible. Most of my recommendations today can be achieved without an external tool. We'll try and make the best use of what we've got. That's the idea through today's session. Also, all these projections show the cybersecurity criminals aren't going to stop anytime soon. It's becoming a huge market. $6 trillion annually is what is projected. The damages that are caused, it's not just a matter of damage of money or monetary value for companies. It's their reputation at stake. It's their entire business that can go extinct overnight. Things like that are really scary. A lot of people can be out of jobs. So the whole deal boils down to understanding that attackers are lurking in your system as we speak, because most of these attacks are taking more time than ever before to even detect, let alone protecting or mitigating them. Even detecting them has become super difficult. So we'll have to change our outlook towards cybersecurity on the whole. That's the agenda with which we'll go forward. We just understood the current state of cybersecurity. We're going to talk about a couple of remote working scenarios and BEC attacks, use cases. Mostly we'll try and solve those use cases. We'll get to the part where we discuss recommendations from FBI. There are 5 very straightforward recommendations that can get your secure score up overnight. That's the idea. The recommendations are very straightforward, easy to implement. And yes, I'll also give you tips to get started right away. You have questions on any of the topics that we are discussing today, don't hesitate to drop a message. I'm going to be answering your questions live. So the 5 common BEC scams. BEC has been out there for quite some time now. They're as old as a decade, and it's started off with attackers trying to scam CEOs and leaders of the organizations, and it's taken many forms and shape afterwards. We'll start with the classic one, which is the CEO fraud, where the attacker tries to pretend to be the CEO of the company. There's already undue pressure on the administrators, on other stakeholders from finance and HR and whatnot, trying to just keep the lights on and keep the business going. And attackers try to leverage this situation. They tend to get hold of a domain name that is similar to that of your organization, close looking, almost difficult to spot that it's a different name. Try to get hold of your CEO information because it's already readily available. In fact, publicly listed companies, almost every bit of the CEO profile is readily available for them to put together the agenda, get the tone of the message right, pretend to have a CEO email ID and push the employees to give in information. They tend to use urgency as their wild card right here. They tend to talk to accounting departments, payment departments, finance, HR, try to get PII on somebody, and even before you know, users in your organization fall prey for it. It isn't any easier. Even critical stakeholders, other executives in the organization, given fall prey because they are not at the luxury of walking to the CEO or confronting him head on and talking about the request or holding a conversation because the CEO is also working remotely. So this has made things super difficult. With the whole pressure of getting things done ASAP, immediate action, users fall prey, they give in information, and even before you know, the entire system is down. So CEO fraud has existed before, targeting the CEOs or pretending to be the CEOs, but now it's become all the more prevalent. We've got 3 specific cases. I understand that you know what cases I'm referring to, where CEO accounts have been attacked and they've been scammed big time, losing millions of user records, not even dollar, it's millions of user records. Talk about all the regulations that will come right after. We've got CCPA, we've got HIPAA and other regulations in healthcare that can be a big nightmare for companies. So we'll move a little forward and we'll see a few other cases where another classic case is law firms or attorneys impersonating, posing as representatives of these law firms, requesting confidential information. They could even pretend to be auditors for all you know. And while working remotely, it becomes difficult to check their identity, and users tend to kind of break or give in when it comes to matters of law. It might be something very sensitive about your company. You might not even realize that that specific piece of information is of that much value for your company, and users tend to give in. So at this point in time, I'd want to take a quick pit stop to talk about assigning values to resources in your company. So when we try to do a data or a disaster recovery plan, many a times it's not dynamic. We try to have qualitative values for our disaster recovery plan. We talk about stakeholders who need to be involved and stuff like that. But most of the times we miss out the fact that there has to be a dollar value that is associated with all internal resources. Now we are talking about users bringing their own devices, users accessing your corporate resources such as your critical file servers or data on your file servers, or collaborating on Microsoft Teams for that matter, making attachments, sending out emails. So the whole volume of data transfer has become much higher than before. So it's important that you start assigning dollar values for your critical resources. Tag ones that are machine critical, tag ones that are business critical, tag ones that are unimportant. So you'll be able to act and monitor on your data leak accordingly. So you would be 100% sure if you had a DLP, or data leak prevention system in place, or a data loss prevention system in place, and you get flagged every single time when someone's requesting for such sensitive information, when someone's sharing such sensitive information. So have that in mind. So we were talking about the case where the attacker pretends to be someone or an executive from the government or from a law firm. So that is something that your users need to be educated to look out for. All right. So the next option, obvious options to get real straightforward, it's all about the dollar end of the day. So attackers tend to pretend to be vendors or other organizations with who you are in business with. They try to impersonate employees from those organizations. They could have cracked down another employee email account somewhere else. and you could be the victim because you didn't realize that it was a hacker all along. The worst part is these scams can go for months together. They can pretend to hold legitimate conversations with you, pretend to be honest suppliers, in fact, have a full-fledged company website and whatnot to accredit their legitimacy. And these attackers tend to establish these relationships long run, maybe 3 months, 4 months, run these scams and send out a bogus invoice and get you to pay or do a wire transfer. So it becomes really difficult when they try to swindle this way. And while working remotely, once again, the classic case, unable to verify the authenticity physically, that's the problem right here. So it makes it all the more difficult and puts a lot of pressure on stakeholders across the organization, not just IT. Data theft is a classic case. Sensitive information gets stolen. Emails that pretend to be from, let's say, the World Health Organization, right? Or the CDC for that matter. These emails have been circulating and it's really annoying, not just annoying, but also very insensitive because they tend to pretend to be the CDC giving away a cure for the disease or talk about the vaccination, and our users tend to fall prey. In fact, it so happens that very many countries around the world, they've had big scams operating and banks have been taken down because of this very case. So we'll need to understand that attackers are going to any length. They're going to try and get your HR to give away some data about users, try to get your finance to give away data about your users, and not just that, attack your users straightforward, try drop an email in their inbox, try to fish them into giving away data that is critical to your organization, which brings me to the next case where we are talking about account compromise. So when your users are targeted, you do not know how are they going to respond. As much as you try to educate them, they also are going to give in to these attacks. Classic case, they get socially engineered, and these fraudulent users not just take over their bank accounts but take over their entire identities, impersonate and create what are called synthetic identities. So that's a concept that you should be looking out for: synthetic identities. Attackers try to make an amalgamation of your current user's identity, try to pretend to be someone else, get hold of their credentials, falsify bank information, whatnot, and get hold of your account. So this is at a user level, this is at a personal level, and it also happens and can very much extend into your organization, letting your entire business take a hit. So through the course of last year, it's become very clear that BEC is going to prevail, majorly because of the fact that humans can be exploited. No matter what sort of software solution you have in place, attackers are going to find a workaround because that one human variable in your equation is the weakest link. So we need to start looking outward. We need to start reiterating our philosophy where we take zero trust into the account, because it boils down to one account being compromised and your entire network going down. All the cases of BEC look somewhat like this. The attacker tries to get into your organization, compromises one account through a phishing scam, gets hold of one endpoint and installs a malware that helps him to run quick searches inside the organization. You know how unsafe Active Directory is when it comes to an attacker getting hold of any single endpoint. Basic queries on PowerShell can get hold of all your user data even before you know. Talk about critical stakeholders in the organization. An LDAP query can get the job done as to who your users are. And even before you know, your entire security is down. One account compromised, another account compromised, accounts related to that, privileges related to that, escalations done. And right when it's important for your organization, the domain admin gets compromised. You're held hostage. And there are certain cases where the attackers don't want you to hold hostage. In fact, they don't even want you to know that they exist in your system. Take their own sweet time, create a lot of holes or loopholes in your system, plant a lot of users, and start exfiltrating data. And this happens to an extent that it takes a couple of months to discover. And that has been the classic case. We've seen it over and over again in the last 3 or 4 months while we've unearthed a lot of these cases where they've laterally moved, where they've set their roots deep down. It becomes very, very difficult, and your entire organization needs a deep clean. So what do? You start trying to take the zero trust approach. You stop trusting your users, you try to foolproof them, do not give authority or security at their hands, and start implementing these FBI recommendations that are straightforward. In fact, surprisingly, useful observation is the fact that FBI recommendations also align with the NIST recommendations that were given a while back. The NIST put together a cybersecurity framework. I've got the resource with me just in case if you'd be interested to go through the framework, a very comprehensive one. Drop me a message and I'll try to share the resource that we've built around an interpretation of the NIST framework. So now, when it comes to the FBI recommendations, they had to step in. The numbers went up. In fact, October 2019 was the first time when the Department of Homeland Security had to come out with recommendations. That was a little ahead of time. That was when just Office 365 was being adopted. But 2020, mid 2020, FBI again had to come with their recommendations to tell you that organizations have to muster up. It's about time that they change. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples to be precise. I'm going to give you 5 use cases and how you can find your way through them. The first one is the classic case of social media fraudulence. So we talk about C-level executives and their accounts being compromised on social media. That's a big problem. That's going to be a mess. So you'll need to ensure your users, not just C-level, everybody treads carefully. The problem is, a while back at work, you had restrictions to stop your users from using either like a social media or any other personal stuff on office resources. But now while they are BYODing, it's obvious that they're going to check their personal email, be prone to attacks because of malwares that they downloaded unconsciously while visiting one of the sites that they visit. You never really know. And these accounts can be taken over even before you know. They're very quick, very fast to act. Attackers try to engineer your users, get hold of their persona, they build profiles for your users, they wait, they bait, and they get what they require. And in fact, these social media attacks can be pretty intense. They can be engineered to, falsify someone's identity. They can befriend you and they can get hold of your data. So be cautious of social media attacks and let your users know about it. This is just the start of things, but how do you go about protecting? That's just a precaution that you could take, but this one is definitely a must have, which is a second factor of authentication, because we see instances where M365 logins or Office 365 logins are spoofed. Your users are sent an email with a login asking them, saying that their passwords have expired and asking them to reset, while they are redirected to a malicious page where the attacker collects information such as credentials, usernames, and passwords. So keystrokes are not just logged, your entire data are taken right here. So you need to be 100% sure in trying to educate your users methods and ways to stop them from falling prey for any of these factors. You'll be astounded by the fact that how many organizations have kept their entire networks open. We're talking about organizations exposing their internal applications, internal servers for the want of collaboration, for the want of running business. We've seen a 57% increase in organizations projecting their applications onward to the internet, because a lot of business processes over the course of time have been run over the intranet. And at times when you want them to be able to access, this becomes mandatory, a second level of validation. You don't want these scammers to get into your system. So a brilliant fail-safe mechanism obviously is MFA. We've been lobbying for MFA for a very long time. And it's about time that you start implementing, and MFA can be the deal breaker for attackers. It becomes easy for you to also implement with all the options that are available. If you're already on M365, an easy option for you would be to implement the Microsoft Mobile Authenticator. It's very straightforward. It's easy to implement. Your users aren't going to find any trouble adopting it. And the whole part about MFA is you don't really need to worry once you have it in place, because if you're talking about personal identities and validating them, there's going to be Face ID with respect to users using an iOS device, or let's say even fingerprint with a lot of devices, Android devices. It makes it really easy. So that friction part of it is out of the equation. So try and start with MFA. I'm going to go through a couple of reasons why MFA is important. I just made my point as to implementing MFA. So we'll go a little forward. There's this whole deal with Active Directory password policies that have fallen short since time immemorial. They're almost as old as me, I'd like to say. Active Directory password policies, as you see, have native limitations as to how complex can they be, and attackers try to take advantage of this one aspect. And also when it comes to the granularity, they aren't as granular. There are different stakeholders in your organization that require different levels of granularity or security for their passwords itself, and that isn't happening. And as you go forward, it becomes complex to stop basic actions on passwords like one size fits it all. You can't have an entire group policy just having to run passwords that aren't safe. We're talking about policies that don't prevent users from using incremental passwords, that do not prevent users from having dictionary words as a part of their passwords. We cannot also give in to the whole idea of password expiration. The whole deal with password expiration has changed. FBI recommends you not to set expiration. That's a counterintuitive recommendation, we may think, but turns out while your users are required to reset their passwords, they end up giving out their passwords most of the time on a wrong platform, on a malicious page. That's the reason why it's much safer to not reset passwords, rather set strong passwords and reduce the frequency with which you ask them to reset their passwords. That's the whole idea right here. So there is user behavior analytics that you can take hold. User behavior analytics will employ machine learning to understand user behavior. When there are deviations, probably that's when your systems are going to be notifying you to reset a password. But for that, any other good day, it's absolutely okay to have one strong password that has all of those factors in mind and not reset them. So very many ways where Microsoft really falls short and your users are still going to end up setting an incorrect password or probably a weak password of these sorts that don't match the recommendation when you just resort to the native ways of doing it. So here's the thing, it becomes easy, right? When an attacker tries to initiate an attack, it's as easy as this. They get hold of one of these dictionary words or lists from the internet readily available. You look up for it, you get entire massive volumes of dictionary words, of words that are commonly used, breaches in the past. So there's this one useful resource that I want to point, which is this website called haveibeenpwned.com. So they do a good job of finding out if your email has been compromised in one of those common attacks that have happened in the past, or your email or your password is lying out there. So you can very much look at that site to check if your email ID or your password has been compromised. Do try haveibeenpwned.com, and immediately if your users are using such stale passwords, you might recommend them to check right there and replace their passwords. You could do that. And password spray attacks becomes very easy if your users are going to follow Active Directory password policies. Weak policies out there, dictionary attacks and password sprays can get access to your user accounts in no time. So that's something that we need to be wary of. So how do you go about creating complex passwords? That's the question right here. So we need to work a little bit on the history of passwords. We don't want users to be setting incremental passwords. That becomes easy for attackers to crack. So my first password was password at 123. And my next password is going to be password at 1234 because I don't want to remember something that's complex. I'm prone to setting weak passwords. That's the whole idea. So we'll go forward and stop them from using incremental passwords. We'll have a cap on the minimum length. We'll stop users from using predictable words or dictionary words and go forward. So you'll need to have a tool that can enforce password policies. You will need to ensure that your users do not set weak passwords, stop them from using incremental passwords, stop them from using passwords from characters from their previous passwords, stop them from using their account name or username or anything mildly relevant, or in fact, for that matter, choose a dictionary that's out there. We have an updated dictionary. You can write to me, I can give you one, and stop them from using any passwords from the dictionary itself. So this is the first recommendation that FBI has for you. Don't let your users fall prey for password attacks. And the easiest way to go about doing it is enforce strong password policies. You can stop them from using patterns too, patterns that are pertinent to your organization. Most of the users tend to use names of the organization or people that they work with, or resort to patterns like 123 QWERTY, we call that keyboard waltzing. You can stop users from doing that with a tool in place. So do look out for solutions that would enhance your existing password policies, be it Active Directory, be it Microsoft 365, be it Office 365. So here's the catch. The whole idea of us moving M365 comes at the cost of building hybrid systems. Why am I talking about Active Directory password policies right here? Most of us are hybrid, and the M365 password policies aren't very different from the Active Directory password policy. So you need a system that can sit on top of these password policies and ensure that your users don't set weak passwords. An easy way to get around this is to employ passphrases. They're much stronger than passwords. I have a passphrase as my password. I would recommend anybody to have a passphrase as a password. It becomes a lot more difficult with that one additional character, with that one additional special character in the passphrase. That's the idea with which we need to make the passwords a little stronger. So as we go about doing this, we try our best to keep the password stronger. But obviously, in addition to that, we'll want to foolproof it with MFA. That extra layer of security can be SMS based, but trust me, I usually do not recommend OTP. They aren't very safe. You have screen notifications turned on. Anybody could get away with your OTP and have your account hacked. So we don't want that. Look for options that are more personal. And in fact, even knowledge-based second factor authenticators that require you to remember something isn't a great way of doing it. Look for possession factors like your fingerprint, like your biometric factors. That is a little better when compared to other factors. So the easy way to stop or be sure that your passwords, irrespective of the security of your passwords, foolproofing them is MFA. And single sign-on is a great way because you will have control as to the single sign-on platform. You'll know app usage, you'll know user data, you'll be able to understand how are they going about using applications. And once it's authenticated, once you've done it right, they'll get access to many applications because of the handshakes that are done at the background. So do look at single sign-on as an option after having authenticated their accounts with strong passwords and MFA, so that they don't need to end up giving away their credentials or filling out their credentials on every platform that they log in. A couple of options that you can do for MFA right here on your screen. You can try to enroll your users right away. You can try to send them out notifications on what options do they have and go forward with MFA. So first factor plus second factor makes your access validated. That's the idea with MFA, and that's what FPA recommends too. The next one right here is on the whole idea of evoking a sense of urgency to get the job done. So right when you know there's a suspicious actor in your organization, maybe an insider, maybe a hacker, you need to be notified. And how can you essentially go about doing that? Because it's difficult to just educate users. An easy way to stop users from attaching critical files on their emails or on their Microsoft Teams or while they're communicating with external actors or factors is a simple e-discovery platform setup. So Microsoft, if you're on M365, you already have e-discovery based on your subscription, or you can look out for tools that do the job for you. Have smart key phrases tagged, stop your users from responding to mails or get flagged when there are words like secret, immediate, urgent, attention needs to be given, or payment. Such words in your email, you will need to be very sure. You will need to be notified when it's not and when there's a deviation in behavior. So it becomes very easy when you have this flag. You'll be surprised as to how many malicious intended emails land in your user's inbox. So you can take help of e-discovery and configure your DLP or data leak prevention rules in your M365 dashboard accordingly. So I'm going to stop for a bit to help you evaluate where is your current security posture. So if you're on your M365 or on your Office 365 instance, I would want you to open a new tab and search for Secure Score. So Secure Score is a dashboard that Microsoft has put together for enterprises and businesses that are using M365. It gives you a very clear snapshot of what exactly is your security posture on M365 or Office 365 setup at this very moment. It's going to take into consideration factors like your policies that you've configured, factors like whether you've turned on MFA or not, factors like what are the rules and what are the auditing options that you've enabled, what's the DLP laws that you've enabled. Very many recommendations are going to be out there for you right when you log in. So when you get into your secure score dashboard, you'd have a score on a base value of, let's say, 500 to 700 based on what's your infrastructure like. And depends on what your value is, you'll get recommendations on what to do and address right away. So that's a great place to start and a great resource. Do not miss out. Look up for the secure score dashboard. You're already entitled to the dashboard. It gives you recommendations. And right after you implement these recommendations, you can revisit the secure score dashboard and you would find immediate results. And the point that I just made about turning on MFA, it would give you 50 points on a base of 500 points, and MFA is that important. And DLP, again, turning on data loss prevention loss in your control center gives you another 30-40 points. Depends on how your organization is structured. So do look out for the secure score dashboard, because we will want to be ahead of the attackers, take a snapshot of our current scenario, even use that as a benchmark and build on top of it. So getting back to the point that I was trying to make, emails need to be monitored. Emails need to be looked up for critical words or terms with your e-discovery. So there's advanced pattern search that's available on a couple of solutions out there. Look for solutions that go above and beyond the basic keyword search and not restricted to that. Pattern-based search helps you stop users from giving out their social security numbers. The system is trained to learn based on input that you give, probably account details, probably credit card information, probably PII, anything that resembles PII, the system can flag and let you know. And in fact, if you want immediate countermeasures in place, it can stop that from going forward. It can notify the administrators, it can ensure that the users do not engage with such malicious actors. That's the idea right here. So look for solutions that have advanced pattern-based context search that goes beyond just basic e-discovery, so that you can be extra vigilant about the whole data loss right here. That's the area. So you don't want your users to be trading emails. Business email compromises even can be as simple as someone requesting for information and someone giving out the information. So we want to be 100% sure right there. The next obvious thing is external actors who are going to be sending out emails. So educate your users on domains, educate or get flagged if you want. If you already have a list of malicious actors, you can look out. There are a lot of web kits out there that are going to give out lists. You can have them flagged, you can blacklist them, and you can stop them from emailing your users, or even easier is to just ask your users to be a little more careful. So this is something that everybody can do, but if you want to be 100% sure, you can start monitoring with reports. You can get hold of mail summaries. You can get hold of who are the users who are most susceptible to attacks, who are high value individuals in your organization, who's the top sender who sends out most of the business email communications that require some sort of clearance. You can have all of that looked into. You can look for stop spam recipients. So these are targets or attacks such as so you can employee malware detections. You can do whatnot by just analyzing spams, malwares, and look up for messages that are quarantined. They hold a lot of valuable insights. So through and through, you can have mail traffic reports that give you a clear insight, and you'll be a mile ahead of the attacker if you have these implementations in place. So look for solutions that give you a comprehensive mail traffic report on who are your most critical resources and how are they being targeted. Gives you an out of the box report and helps you clear out your systems. The stop spam reports makes it easy for you to have anti-spam rules in your system. That's the idea with which we need to go forward. So that is my next recommendation for you, being vigilant of external email. So far we visited 4 different recommendations. I'm going to, before I head on to the 5th one, let me quickly reiterate. The first one is being cautious while you are on social media, asking your users to not give away information or not be scammed, because there's also this whole idea of social identity or bring your own identity at play. Very many applications or collaboration platforms or SaaS platforms that we use for work can be logged in with your social identity too. So be 100% sure that you're not giving away your credentials. The next one is implementing multi-factor authentication. So I topped it up with password security. We spoke about going above and beyond the basic security policies that are already there in native systems and how MFA can be the deal breaker for attackers. We also had got to a point where we were discussing as to how to treat suspicious requests that are from users outside your organization with e-discovery as an option or a pattern-based search as an option, and how to be vigilant about external emails and how to use mail traffic to your advantage. I'm going to get to the last point for today's session, which is more on a logistics level where you try to audit your systems, monitor your systems, and have a track record for what's happening. The easiest way to start with is log on activity. Now, tons and tons of information you'll be able to unearth if you just keep track of log on activity of users. Because with the whole deal of remote working, there's going to be deviation in the time of the day, the location from where they're logging in, the devices with which they're logging in, the IP reputation of their home network, and so on and so forth. Endless list of biometrics that are going to go on with log on information. So if you have a clear tracking mechanism that not just cracks through successful logons or tracks successful logons, logon failures too, you get a lot of insights. Because you know what's a brute force attack? A brute force attack is repetitive logon failures followed by a successful logon. And if it happens in less than a minute, that obviously means it's a computer program running in the background. So if you have an MI or AL, ML or AI algorithm that's backed by user behavior analytics, you would be able to call out, you would be able to know when is it a perpetrator or when is it your actual user. Non-business hour transactions are an easy way to figure out. So you will be able to do all of this only when you go above and beyond. And like in the beginning of today's presentation, the whole idea of not being able to figure out these attacks or being able to figure out these attacks right after everything has happened, right after 5-6 months from the day of attack, is the trouble right here. And very many times we are restricted or handicapped by the native limitations of these tools. You talk about Office 365 or M365, they have a native cap of 90 days. They require you to scale up in your plan, get a E5 or whatnot to get going with more days, or being able to audit for an extended period. So you would need systems and tools. Look out for solutions that don't cap your audit data, because you would very much need it when you're doing a root cause analysis. When you're doing a forensic analysis of an attack, you would need data to back you up. You should be able to clean your system, not just that, but also be able to stop or patch those weak spots. So you would need data for that. So look for solutions that can log your data, monitor your data, retain your data. One easy tip or trick for you is to start with your logon activity. So if you can go back, you will get tremendous information on logon failure. You would know who are those users who frequently log themselves out. Account lockout steps in a couple of cases, but logon failure gives you very clear information on failed logon attempts basically. And then there's logon success. You can get information on that. You can schedule an alert right when there are repeated logon failures. That's someone trying to crack your account. A simple recommendation again, FBI requiring you to ensure that you have enough monitoring done on your mailbox logins. They are monitored right on time. The data is retained, and you can look into it whenever it's required when you're doing a forensic analysis. Also stay ahead of the system. Since you already have the data, let that aggregate and you be notified of logon failure. So we need to look out for solutions. One recommendation today right here is 8360. It kind of covers the recommendations given out by FBI as well. Very straightforward. The dashboard can get most of the job done, gives you clear user reports on your M365 users. What are their behavioral patterns? If there are policies that are being modified, you get notifications for that. And it goes above and beyond, because we are at a point where it's not just security. We need to get our management also in place with respect to licenses that are being assigned. You get real-time usage reports on users' activity on a license. If there are inactive users who just hoard licenses, that again is a big problem. Users who never use an application or a service, but just hoard these accounts, and that could be an entry point for an attacker, because those inactive accounts are a sweet spot for attackers. So very many insights. You would need to have a solution that can sit on top of your M365 ecosystem, give you insights, and identity intelligence and user behavior analytics is what we need at that time. These were my recommendations, or maybe my interpretations of recommendations from FBI. I hope you found the entire list of recommendations helpful. There are very many to go. The easiest recap that I can give you is to look into your secure score dashboard. That's a great takeaway for today. Check your secure score, see where you stand. Look at the recommendations that Microsoft themselves give out. have them done, probably have a 15-day implementation course for that. And right after that, maybe a month's time from now, when you revisit your secure score dashboard, you would be in a much better situation. So do look out. Security threats are on the rise, no doubt. Try educating your users as much as possible. There are simple steps that can make a great difference. One simple example from today's session is implementing MFA. So I'm going to be out there right now taking your questions. There's a chat window. I already see a couple of you asking me questions. I've tried and answered a couple of questions on the chat on the go as I spoke. I'm also going to try and take the questions that I've missed out right now. I'm going to be around for another 10 minutes to take your questions, guys. You can write to me. My email ID is right on screen, jreddy@manageengine.com. I'd be more than happy to help you out if you're in the process of migrating to Office 365 or M365 for that matter, or in adopting M365. I have a recommendation guide that can tell you what exactly should you be doing. All the very best for your entire remote work journey. It seems to be the case where we are going to be in a hybrid model, continue to work remotely for probably, let's say, the rest of the year. I'm not really sure. So having all of that in mind, my simple request to you is to stay safe. Uh, do watch out. Thank you so much, guys. My email ID is on the screen and I'm on the chat right now to take your questions live.